The Galactic Armada moved in a vast formation across the stars, its ships spanning light years in every direction, a show of power and dominance that made lesser species cower at the mere thought of facing them. The fleet was a mosaic of alien vessels, each representing a different species, each armed with technology far beyond what humanity had ever dreamed of. It had been years since the Armada had encountered anything that posed a threat to them. They were the pinnacle of galactic warfare. No one dared challenge their might. This quiet sector of space had been peaceful for centuries. No wars, no rebellions, just the occasional trade and supply runs. It was almost too calm for the Armada's taste. That was until their sensors picked up an anomaly. A ship appeared from nowhere. And though the ship was small, barely noticeable against the backdrop of the Armada's enormous fleet, it was different. It didn't register as anything the Armada had ever encountered, and that piqued their curiosity. The alien commanders of the Armada were skeptical at first. A single human warship coming out of nowhere. They assumed it was a glitch in their readings, or perhaps a scout ship sent to test their might. But the readings persisted, and soon the blip on their radar became a solid object, with a name, the U.S. Titan. The name alone seemed almost laughable to the alien commanders. The humans had never shown themselves to be anything other than weak and easily dealt with, so they weren't too concerned about the arrival of this new ship. They had encountered human vessels before and crushed them easily in the past. This time would be no different. But even as they dismissed the human ship's significance, they couldn't help but wonder why the humans were so bold this time, why they were sending a warship when there had never been a need before. And so the fleet commander, Admiral Tikal, ordered the ships to close in on the human vessel, a slow, methodical approach designed to intimidate, make the human captain quake with fear. On the bridge of the U.S. Titan, Captain Sarah Hayes stood tall, her hand steady, as she watched the massive Armada draw closer. Their ships moved like a well-oiled machine, but Hayes wasn't intimidated. She had led human ships into combat before and survived. She had faced enemies who outnumbered her and her crew and emerged victorious. Now, she was facing the might of the Galactic Armada, and she would do what humans always did when backed into a corner: fight back with everything they had. Her crew worked with practiced precision, navigating the ship's systems, running diagnostics, and preparing for what was sure to come. They knew that this battle would be unlike anything they had experienced before, but the humans had something the Armada did not. They had the will to keep fighting no matter the odds. The Titan was a small ship compared to the massive warships of the Armada, but it was one of the most advanced ships humanity had ever built, and its crew was unlike any other. Captain Hayes calmly ordered the ship into a battle-ready stance. They would stand their ground. She wouldn't let the Armada think for 1 second that humanity was weak or easy prey. They would make a statement that would echo across the galaxy. Humans were not to be underestimated. The Armada sent their first transmission demanding that the Titan identify itself and submit to inspection. The response came cold and direct: "We are humans, and we are not backing down." Captain Sarah Hayes stood in front of the massive view screen of the U.S. Titan, her eyes fixed on the approaching Armada. She had faced many challenges in her career, but this was different. The stakes had never been so high. The ship was silent save for the hum of machinery and the occasional murmur from her crew. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one spoke about it. It was as if everyone was waiting for the inevitable moment when the first shot would be fired. Her first officer, Commander Daniel Klein, walked up beside her, his expression tense but unreadable. He had seen his share of battles as well, and was no stranger to the pressure that came with being in command, but even he couldn't hide the uncertainty that clouded his normally calm demeanor. "Captain," he began, his voice low and steady, "they're not slowing down. They've got us surrounded on all sides." "I know, Captain," Hayes replied, her voice firm and unwavering, "but we're not going to run. Not today." There was a brief silence as Klein studied her face, searching for any sign of doubt, but he found none. Sarah Hayes was a leader who had never faltered in her decisions. No matter how dire the circumstances, she had led them through the toughest of situations, and they had always come out the other side stronger. But this was different. The Armada was unlike any opponent they had ever faced before, and yet she knew deep down they still had a chance. "Signal all crew members to battle stations," she ordered, her voice commanding and calm. "Prepare for immediate engagement. We may be outnumbered, but we're not outclassed." The crew responded immediately, moving into position with practiced precision and focus. Everyone knew their role and the importance of what they were about to do. The Titan was more than just a warship. It was a symbol of human resolve and ingenuity, and this would be their moment to prove that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. As the Armada drew closer, Hayes' mind raced through the strategies they had practiced in the event of a battle like this. It wasn't about winning through sheer firepower. They had none of that compared to the Armada's vast fleet, but they had something far more valuable: the ability to adapt on the fly, to make decisions when the odds were stacked against them, and to fight with a determination that no one could break. Her fingers flew over the controls, bringing up tactical displays of the enemy fleet, their weapons systems, their shields, their vulnerable points. She studied them all with the intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. There were weaknesses she could exploit, she was certain of it. The first transmission from the Armada had been demanding and condescending, as if they believed their superiority would be enough to make the humans fold. But instead of fear, there was only a calm resolve in Hayes' voice when she had replied, "We are humans, and we are not backing down." The words felt heavier now as she looked out at the fleet that waited like a pack of wolves closing in on its target. "We're ready," Captain Klein said, breaking her train of thought. "Whenever you give the order." She took a deep breath. The moment had arrived. It was time to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. "Prepare to engage," she said quietly, but with complete authority. "On my mark." The crew held their breath as they waited for the command, but Captain Hayes knew what was coming. This wasn't just a battle. This was a declaration. Humanity was no longer a species to be ignored or underestimated. They would fight for their survival, and they would fight with everything they had. "Now," Hayes said, and the Titan sprang into action. The first volley from the Armada came in a flash of blinding light as energy blasts shot toward the U.S. Titan. The crew braced for impact, but Captain Hayes remained calm, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. She had known the attack was coming. She had prepared for it. But now it was time for her crew to show their worth. The Titan was fast, agile, and precise. It wasn't the biggest ship in the galaxy, but it didn't need to be. "Evade," Captain Hayes commanded, her voice cool and collected. "Engage evasive maneuvers, full thrusters." The Titan's engines roared to life, throwing the ship into a sharp turn. The energy blasts from the Armada missed by mere meters, crackling as they sailed harmlessly past. The human warship darted through the void of space, cutting through the debris and plasma fire with almost impossible speed. The maneuver left the Armada's fleet off balance, their attacks coming in too slow and uncoordinated. The Titan was already positioning itself to strike. "We've got them rattled," Captain Klein said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and excitement. "They're not expecting this." Hayes nodded, her hand steady on the controls. "Keep them guessing. Don't give them a chance to adapt." Despite the confusion, the Armada quickly regrouped, their ships realigning into a tighter formation. But it was too late. The Titan had already found its rhythm. The crew didn't need orders now. They moved in perfect synchronicity, as if their training had been meant for this very moment. The Titan's cannons fired in rapid succession, hitting the closest enemy ship with pinpoint accuracy. The blast cracked the ship's shield and sent it spiraling into the void, its systems failing one by one. The alien vessel exploded in a silent burst of fire, leaving behind only the remnants of a once mighty warship. The Armada's commanders, watching in disbelief, exchanged harsh words over their communication channels. The sight of their own ships falling apart in the hands of a single human vessel was too much for some to process. They were used to dominating weaker species, not being outmaneuvered by them. "Prepare to fire on the next target," Hayes ordered. "Take out their engines. Disable their mobility." The Titan's weapons fired again, this time targeting the engines of a larger alien cruiser. With each shot, the ship's engines began to sputter and spark, the once mighty vessel slowing as its power waned. The Armada's ships continued to fire back, but they were growing increasingly disorganized. Their tactics were rigid, predictable. The Titan used every advantage it had, weaving through the incoming fire, delivering calculated, precise strikes that left the Armada reeling. Each hit took them closer to crippling the enemy fleet. "They're not able to track us," Klein said, watching as another Armada ship was disabled. "We've got them running in circles." "We're not just running circles," Hayes replied, her eyes never leaving the display. "We're rewriting the rules. These ships have never had to face a threat like this." The Armada was beginning to break down under the relentless assault. Communications were becoming chaotic. The once unified fleet now split into several scattered groups trying to fend off the Titan. Captain Hayes could hear the confusion in the enemy's voice as their commanders tried to regain control, but it was already too late. The Titan was too fast, too unpredictable, and it was tearing through them piece by piece. "Captain," one of the bridge officers called. "Another wave of reinforcements is coming in. They're trying to regroup." Hayes stood tall, her face set with determination. "Let them come. We're not going anywhere." As the Armada's reinforcements appeared in the distance, Hayes' resolve only strengthened. They thought they could overwhelm her crew with numbers, but the humans had shown time and time again that they were capable of more than simply fighting. They were capable of surviving when no one thought it possible. And they would show the galaxy that today would be the day the Armada learned that lesson the hard way. The Armada's reinforcements arrived as expected, a dozen more ships, each larger and more powerful than the last. They formed a massive wall of firepower, and for a moment, it seemed like the Titan might be overwhelmed. The incoming ships were organized, their weapons charging as they prepared to launch a unified strike. But Captain Hayes didn't flinch. She had anticipated this. The Titan was small, yes, but it was nimble and relentless. "Hold your fire," Hayes commanded, her voice steady. "Let them think they have us." Her crew exchanged glances, their faces a mix of concentration and wariness. But they trusted their captain, and they knew that when she gave an order, it was time to execute without hesitation. The Titan came to a sudden halt, drifting like a baited lure amidst the massive ships. The Armada, expecting the human vessel to attempt another evasive maneuver, took the bait. They fired. The Titan's shields flared brightly, holding against the onslaught for only a split second before Captain Hayes gave the order. Evasive maneuver, full power to thrusters now. The Titan shot forward at full speed, cutting through the firestorm of the Armada's weapons with uncanny precision. The ship wove between incoming blasts, almost dancing around the attacks, as the Armada's ships failed to correct their aim quickly enough to match the Titan's movement. The reinforcements had arrived in perfect timing, but now they were completely disoriented, their firepower more dangerous to their own ships than to the Titan. "Prepare the secondary weapons array," Hayes instructed, her voice unwavering. "It's time to make them pay." The crew worked like a well-oiled machine, shifting systems and readying the Titan for its next move. With the Titan now closing the distance between it and the Armada's reinforcements, it was time to turn the tables. The Titan wasn't the most heavily armed ship, but it wasn't short on surprises. One by one, the weapons array powered up, and the ship unleashed a brutal volley of focused energy bursts aimed at the weak points of the Armada's vessels. Each hit was methodical. Engines, shields, propulsion. The reinforcements formation began to fracture under the assault. One of the larger ships, a massive cruiser, tried to realign its weapons to fire at the Titan, but it was too late. The human warship had already darted to its blind spot, where its firepower was nearly useless. A well-placed strike took out the cruiser's command center, and its crew scrambled to regain control, leaving the ship adrift. The Titan's weapons didn't let up, hitting vital systems with incredible precision. "Captain, they're losing coordination," Klein called out, sounding almost surprised. "They've lost several ships already, and they're beginning to scatter." Hayes watched the unfolding chaos with a cool, calculating gaze. The Armada, once so confident in their power, was beginning to panic. The human vessel's tactics had shaken them to their core. The Armada's fleet had always relied on overwhelming force, on sheer numbers, but now they were facing something they hadn't prepared for: human tenacity, resourcefulness, and adaptability. "I want their communications network down," Hayes ordered, her voice sharp. "Let's make sure they can't coordinate anymore." The Titan shifted course, heading straight for the nearest command ship. With its advanced targeting systems, it fired directly at the Armada's communication array, sending a jolt of energy that severed their connection to the rest of the fleet. The Armada's remaining ships were now flying blind, their once great cohesion shattered. The Titan was no longer just evading. It was systematically picking apart the Armada's strength, piece by piece, without mercy. "We've got them," Hayes said quietly, but there was no arrogance in her voice. "They thought they could wipe us out, but they didn't understand. We don't stop. Not until the last shot is fired." As the Titan continued its assault, the Armada's once proud ships now found themselves in retreat. The human warship had turned the tide of battle, and it wasn't done yet. The Titan might not have the firepower of the Armada's fleet, but it had something far more dangerous: the will to survive, and the ability to fight when all hope seemed lost. The sound of battle reverberated through the Titan's hull as Captain Hayes took in the situation with a steely calm. Her crew was working like a synchronized unit, each member focused on their tasks with precision and discipline. The Armada's retreat had created a momentary lull in the chaos, but it was only temporary. Hayes knew this wasn't over. They still had enemy ships to deal with, alien vessels that wouldn't retreat easily. The tactical officer's voice cut through the hum of the ship's systems. "Captain, 3 cruisers are trying to break formation. They're preparing to make another run at us." Hayes turned toward the screen, where the dark silhouettes of the alien warships loomed like vultures circling their prey. The remaining cruisers, battered and scarred, were positioning themselves for a final stand. They knew the Titan was vulnerable now. Its shields had taken a heavy toll during the initial barrage from the fleet, but they didn't understand the humans' resolve. They didn't realize that the Titan wasn't a vessel that would fall easily. "Ready the main guns," Hayes said, her voice like ice. "We'll take them out one by one." "We've still got time," Klein said from his station, eyes focused on the redouts. "They won't reach firing range for another 5 minutes, Captain." Hayes nodded, taking a deep breath. The battle had been long, but they were nearly through it. The Armada's ships were crippled, their communications severed, their numbers dwindling. But these 3 cruisers were dangerous, and if they had one last chance to regroup, they would try to make it count. "Can we hit their engines?" Hayes asked, eyes narrowing. Klein glanced over the tactical readout. "Yes, Captain. If we target their engine cores first, we'll disable them before they can fire. But it'll require precise timing." "That's what we're good at," Hayes replied. "We won't give them a chance to regroup. Let's finish this." The Titan slid smoothly into position, its powerful thrusters allowing it to move with agility despite its size. The 3 cruisers were closing in, but their movements were sluggish. The battle had taken its toll on them too. Hayes could already see the cracks in their once unshakable defense, the gaps in their formations. The humans had the advantage. "Locking on," Klein said. "Weapons are charging. The moment they're in range, we'll take them out." Hayes watched as the alien ships continued to approach, their weapons charging, but their formation growing weaker. They were trying to make one last stand, but they had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and strike when it mattered most. "Now," Hayes barked, her voice commanding the bridge as the tension reached its peak. "Target the lead ship's engine core first. Fire." The Titan fired a precise, searing bolt of energy that sliced through the void, striking the first cruiser's engines dead on. The ship lurched violently as its propulsion systems exploded, a flare of energy blinding everyone aboard the Titan for a brief moment. The cruiser's massive frame spun helplessly, drifting in space as it was no longer able to move or defend itself. "First one down," Klein said, voice filled with admiration. "We've got 2 more." Hayes didn't let up. "Target the next one's power core. Don't give them a chance." The Titan's weapons locked on to the second cruiser, and in a flurry of expertly coordinated shots, the ship's shields began to fail. A precise hit at the heart of its power core caused a violent cascade of sparks and explosions, rendering it a crippled shell. The cruiser's weapons sputtered out, leaving it powerless. "We've got them scrambling now," Klein reported. "The last one's trying to flee, Captain." Hayes' eyes flashed with determination. "It won't get far. Track it, and target its engines." The final cruiser, now a sitting duck with no hope of outrunning the Titan, tried desperately to turn its ship around and escape. But it was too late. The Titan fired one final blast, hitting the cruiser's engines with unerring accuracy. The alien vessel's propulsion systems exploded in a fiery burst, sending the cruiser spiraling uncontrollably into deep space. "Mission accomplished, Captain," Klein said, exhaling in relief. "We've disabled the last of their ships." Hayes didn't let herself relax just yet. Even though the battle was won, there was still much to be done. The remnants of the Armada's fleet were scattered, broken, and disorganized, but they wouldn't simply vanish. She needed to make sure that no threat remained. "Send a message to Earth Command," Hayes ordered, her voice still firm and resolute. "Let them know we've stopped the Armada, but we need to stay alert. This isn't over yet." The Armada's retreat was becoming more evident with every passing moment. The once formidable fleet, now reduced in number and cohesion, was scrambling to regroup, but their efforts were futile. The Titan had proven that brute force was no match for human ingenuity. The alien commanders, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves reacting, rather than dictating the course of the battle. Captain Hayes stood firm, watching the disarray unfold on the tactical display. She could see the communication channels between the remaining ships buzzing with urgency. They were panicking. There was no order, no clear command structure. It was chaos. "Keep up the pressure," she ordered, her voice steady but fierce. "They're breaking. Don't let them recover." Her crew worked with unrelenting focus, and the Titan surged forward again, its guns firing in quick succession, targeting critical systems on the remaining ships. One by one, the Armada's vessels were falling, shields flickering out, engines sputtering to a halt, and weapons systems going dark. The human warship was methodical, picking off the weakest targets, exploiting gaps in the enemy's formation. With each strike, the Armada's sense of invincibility began to crumble. "We're hitting them faster than they can respond," Klein said, his eyes fixed on the screen. "They'd got no chance to adapt." "I told you they wouldn't adapt," Hayes replied, her gaze sharp. "These alien fleets are too rigid, too reliant on their technology. They don't understand the unpredictability of human tactics. We move faster. We think faster." The enemy's resistance was faltering, but Hayes knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Armada still had a few powerful ships left, and if they could rally together, they might stand a chance. But even now, they were on the back foot, unable to regain the upper hand. The Titan was playing them like a seasoned fighter, moving in close, striking with precision, then disappearing back into the vastness of space before the Armada could react. "They're trying to regroup," one of the officers reported. "It looks like they're setting up for a counterattack." Hayes didn't flinch. "Let them. We've already won the battle. They just don't know it yet." In a desperate bid to save face, the Armada's remaining leaders issued orders to concentrate their fire on the Titan, hoping to at least destroy the human warship before they had to retreat. Dozens of weapons platforms focused their energy on the Titan, beams of concentrated fire lashing out, intent on overwhelming the human ship with sheer destructive force. The Titan jerked and shuddered as the blasts hit, but its shields held firm. The human warship was designed for endurance and resilience, designed to take punishment and keep going. Shields at 75%. The tactical officer reported. We can take a few more hits. Don't let them get comfortable, Hayes snapped. Keep moving. We don't stand still for anyone. Her command was simple, but effective. The Titan surged forward again, darting through the chaos of enemy fire, evading and countering with precision. The ship's weapons fired with deadly accuracy, targeting the Armada's power cores, their engines, and their communication hubs. It was like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, careful, deliberate, but merciless. The Titan wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. It was dismantling the Armada piece by piece. As the battle wore on, the Armada's morale continued to falter. Their ships were being picked off at an alarming rate, and many of their commanders were starting to question their next move. Some of them had never experienced a failure of this scale, and the realization was starting to set in that the human warship wasn't just a threat. It was a harbinger of something they couldn't control. Admiral Tikel is requesting a retreat, one of the communications officers reported. They're pulling back. The news hit the bridge like a thunderclap. Hayes didn't respond immediately, her mind working through the implications. The battle was nearly won. The Armada had no choice but to retreat. For all their technological superiority, they had been bested by a single human warship. Send a message to their command fleet, Hayes ordered. Tell them they're free to leave. But tell them this, they'll never forget the day they met humanity. And they'll never forget the price of underestimating us. The crew moved quickly to relay the message. The Armada's ships, once so imposing, began to turn away, retreating from the Titan with all the haste they could muster. There were no more threats, no more challenges. The battle was over. Captain Hayes watched them go, her expression unreadable. It wasn't a victory she had planned to savor. It was simply a fact. Humanity had proven that it would never back down, no matter the odds, no matter the enemy. And today, the galaxy had learned that lesson the hard way. The Armada's retreat was nothing short of chaotic. Their remaining ships scattered, desperate to put as much distance between themselves and the Titan as possible. The once formidable fleet, which had once controlled vast stretches of the galaxy, now looked like a disorganized collection of vessels fleeing in every direction. The human warship, despite its smaller size and lesser numbers, had utterly dismantled their cohesion. On the bridge of the U.S. Titan, Captain Sarah Hayes allowed herself a brief moment of relief. Her crew had carried out their orders flawlessly, and the battle was nearly over. The massive ships of the Armada were now fleeing, no longer the unstoppable force they had once believed themselves to be. Humanity had shown them what it meant to be underestimated. "We've got their fleet on the run," Klein said, his voice filled with a rare note of triumph. "They're scattering. The remaining ships are trying to flee to the nearest jump points." Hayes didn't share his enthusiasm. She knew better than to celebrate too soon. A retreat was one thing, but she couldn't let her guard down until the last enemy ship was out of reach. She also knew that some of the Armada's leaders were too proud to simply walk away. They might still try to make a stand, and she needed to be ready for that. "Status report on the remaining forces," she ordered, her voice cutting through the momentary lull. The tactical officer quickly tapped into the ship's systems. "The majority of their fleet has either disengaged or is attempting to flee. We've got 3 cruisers attempting to regroup, but they're heavily damaged, Captain. They won't last long without reinforcements." Hayes nodded, watching the visual display of the battle slowly wind down. The Armada had been shattered. Still, she wasn't willing to leave anything to chance. "I want all forward-facing weapons charged. Prepare to fire on any enemy vessel that shows signs of trying to regroup or retaliate." "Understood, Captain," Klein replied, moving toward the tactical station to make sure everything was set for the final phase. The crew moved with familiar urgency, their focus unwavering even as the battle seemed to die down. Hayes watched as the remaining Armada ships attempted to engage their FTL drives, preparing to make a jump to safety. For now, they were retreating. But the message had been sent, loud and clear. The Titan would not let any ship escape unchallenged. "Captain," one of the officers said, her voice tight with urgency, "the lead cruiser is turning back. It looks like they're trying to make one final stand." Hayes' eyes narrowed. Of course. The pride of the Armada wouldn't let their defeat go unanswered. But Hayes was prepared. The Titan had already outmaneuvered them once, and she knew how to deal with their final act of defiance. The human warship adjusted its position, its weapons fully charged and primed for one last strike. "Lock on their engines," Hayes commanded. "We take them out fast. No mercy." The Titan fired first, its weapons sending precise, powerful beams toward the lead cruiser. The alien ship, despite its size and formidable armament, was slow to react. It was heavily damaged, and now it was trying to rally itself for one last assault, one last desperate attempt to turn the tide of battle. But there was no more tide to turn. The Titan had already broken them. The first shot from the Titan tore through the cruiser's forward shields, leaving a blazing gap where its energy defenses had once been. A second shot struck directly at its engines, disabling them in an instant. The cruiser, now a sitting duck, tried to fire back, but its weapons faltered. The Titan's third shot hit the cruiser's weapon systems, silencing any resistance it could have mounted. Within moments, the lead cruiser was dead in the water, drifting helplessly in space. Its crew could only watch as the Titan hovered nearby, its weapons still aimed at their crippled vessel. "Captain," Klein called, his voice calm but with a hint of admiration, "the rest of their ships are jumping to FTL. We've stopped them." Hayes stood for a moment, watching the disabled cruiser, a testament to the will and determination of her crew. "Send a final message to their fleet," she said, her voice as cold and measured as ever. "Tell them this. When humanity comes to fight, we don't stop until the job is done. The galaxy won't forget this day." The message was sent, and the final remnants of the Armada's fleet blinked out of existence as they made their escape into faster-than-light travel. The Titan hovered alone in the void of space, victorious. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or ignored. Captain Hayes exhaled slowly, watching the stars around them. "It's over," she said softly, though her voice held no trace of celebration. This wasn't a victory to relish, it was simply a statement. Humanity had arrived. As the last remnants of the Armada blinked out of existence, Captain Hayes stood motionless, the weight of the battle pressing down on her. The Titan hovered silently in the aftermath, the shattered remains of the once proud fleet now nothing more than debris scattered across the void. The crew was silent, each member lost in their own thoughts as they processed the scale of what they had just accomplished. "Captain," Klein spoke up, his voice breaking the quiet. "We did it. We stopped them." Hayes didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. The fight had been brutal, and though the victory was clear, it still felt unreal. They had taken on the Galactic Armada, an enemy so powerful, so terrifying that their mere presence had once sent entire systems into panic. And yet here they were, standing victorious. "Damage report," she finally said, her voice calm and steady, as always. The tactical officer was quick to reply. "Minimal damage to the hull. Shields are down to 65%. We've got some minor systems malfunctions, but nothing we can't fix. The crew's in good shape, Captain. Everyone did their part." "Good," Hayes nodded, her gaze sweeping across the bridge. It wasn't the victory she had envisioned when the mission started, but they had made it through, and humanity had proven its worth. She turned her attention back to the view screen, watching the now empty space where the Armada had once stood. "Set a course back to Earth," she said. "Let's get out of here." As the Titan began its journey home, the bridge crew settled into their routine. The adrenaline was still fresh, but the battle was over. In the quiet that followed, Hayes found herself reflecting on the fight, on what they had learned, and what the galaxy had learned. The world would never be the same after today. She had known it wouldn't be easy. Facing down an enemy as powerful as the Armada was a daunting task. But humanity had risen to the occasion, not because of their superior technology or firepower, but because they were relentless, because they had something the Armada never could, an unyielding spirit, an unwillingness to give up when all seemed lost. The message that the Titan had sent to the Armada's fleet would echo across the galaxy, no matter how far it traveled. Humans weren't just survivors, they were fighters, and they would never stop fighting. Flynn approached Hayes, his expression unreadable. "Captain, what do you think they'll do?" "The Armada. Will they come back?" Hayes thought for a moment, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I don't know, but if they do, they'll be ready for us. And if they think we'll fold, they're mistaken." "Do you think this changes anything? The way the galaxy sees us?" Klein asked, his voice quieter now. "I think the galaxy has learned two things today," Hayes replied, turning to face him. "First, that underestimating humanity is a dangerous mistake. And second, that we are not afraid to fight for what's ours. We won't back down. Not ever." There was a silence between them as the stars stretched out ahead of the Titan, the ship now sailing through the quiet expanse of space. The crew had already begun preparing for their next mission, their next challenge. But for now, they had time to reflect. "Message sent, Captain," came a voice from across the bridge. "The Armada's retreat is complete. Earth Command is already on the line. They want a debrief." Hayes sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly as the reality of the situation sank in. "All right, get me on the comms," she said, her voice softer now. "Let's let them know what happened." As the Titan began its journey home, it wasn't just a ship returning from battle. It was the symbol of a new beginning, of a species that had refused to be overlooked. The victory would go down in history, but the true significance would be felt for generations to come. Humanity had sent a message that would not be forgotten. And for the first time in a long while, Captain Hayes allowed herself a small, knowing smile. The galaxy had learned exactly what humans were capable of.